Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We are starting Sefer Bereshit, the book of Bereshit, Genesis. Let's say Shehechianu for starting another triennial year of reading Torah together, that we've lived to see this moment together, all of us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu b'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. We bless the source of life who has given us life, sustained us in that life, in order that we are able to reach this wonderful moment in time.
My grandmother did the shehechianu for new fruit, new vegetables, the first time of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a custom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
First time in a long time, first time in the season. First time ever, Shehechianu is for all beginnings. Although, for me, Shehechianu is the quintessential Jewish bracha whenever a deer comes up to the window, or anything. It's just that I have existence, consciousness, and have made it to this moment to see whatever this is or experience whatever this is. It's like, for me, the paradigmatic Jewish response, right, to confronting the beauty of the world. All right, so we are going to begin we're now in the first third of every parsha. So we finished last year the triennial division, finishing the last third. As I've told you many times, that was once the norm, even in the ancient world, to read on a triennial cycle. It was the Babylonian tradition, and so they read on a triennial cycle. So we are well within our tradition's history to be reading a third of each parsha, but we'll now be reading the first third of every parsha. It's a little easier to know then where to start if you're studying at home. So Genesis, Bereshit chapter 1, verse 1. Somebody want to read?
When God was about to create heaven and the earth was a chaos, unformed, and on the chaotic water's face there was darkness. Then God's Spirit glided over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And when God saw how good the light was, God divided the light from the darkness. God then called the light day and called the darkness night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day.
Okay. Who has studied this text with me before?
I think a lot of us.
All right. So you might know that this is one of my favorite texts of all time. You have probably extensive notes in whatever version of Torah you're working from. You have extensive notes on this part of Bereshit, right? First, you're going to have an introduction to the whole idea of the book and what the book is about and what its themes are, but really a lot of times devoted to understanding kind of what this whole Bereshit, this whole creation narrative is about. Because for us, we tend to think of, when we describe the origins of the universe, it's a scientific enterprise to explain how we got to where we are in terms of the universe being what it is. That is not the point of Torah. Torah is not interested in explaining how things got to be exactly the way they are. There's an accepted cosmology in the ancient Near East. This is located firmly within that tradition and is a radical reconstruction of that cosmology, the ancient Near Eastern cosmology. So we're going to look at the ways that our Bereshit narrative is similar and is of that world, and the ways that it introduces something radically new into the ancient Near East, and therefore into everything that follows after that, right? It's a whole new idea in many ways, what we have happening in this chapter of Bereshit. It is not, however, a literal explanation of exactly how and what happened, because what Bereshit is doing is building the stage, the setting for the patriarchal narratives, right? This book is really about the patriarchal narratives. And so this is, if you're going to start at the beginning of our, people's history with the ancestor stories, you set the stage with creation. The point of Bereshit is not to explore creation. Okay? We don't spend a lot of time there. We kind of get it. We get Adam and Chava being created. We have two different versions of that. And then we move on fairly quickly to what happens. Perfection, right? The fall of humankind, because we have free will and free choice, right? That got introduced into the world. That's a problem, right? Or a challenge. And so then it's the decline of the human race until we get the age of the patriarchs. So all of that is kind of a backdrop to the story of Avraham and Sarah. But having said that, we're going to linger with Bereshit today. All right. So how did you translate Bereshit, Ruth? How does your translation deal with the word Bereshit?
Well, I have to read it to know what I think.
One.
Well, one way, I think one of the accepted ways is in the very first sentence when God was about to create heaven and earth. Not God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay, so Bereshit was when God was, in the South we would say, fixin' to create. Yes. So a state of readiness. So this is addressing readiness?
It could be, but it also leaves room for things that came before that are not really germane to our story.
Okay. So we have here a noun that's in the construct state that takes a finite verb, bara, created. This is a common way of opening cosmologies in the ancient world. We also have this form in Leviticus and Isaiah, in Hosea, but it's a difficult one to actually translate. So you can either have this being its own statement that in the beginning of God creating, this is what happened. There's another way of understanding it to be in the beginningness. These are some of the things that happened, right? Not in order of things exactly, but in beginning, here are some things that happen. All right. In any case, what we do know is that given the ancient Near Eastern tradition of explaining how the gods come to be, what we know is that this is the first time we see in ancient Near Eastern literature the idea that the creator God stands completely outside of time, completely outside of the creative process. Right? It is no discussion of how the God came to be or God's origins. Nothing. That is unusual. That doesn't happen in ancient Near Eastern literature. So this is a new idea that the creator God stands completely apart from time, outside of anything that is, was, would be, completely outside of that. And for the most part, I'm not going to say and completely alone. Right? So that is new in the world.
There's also, regarding the relationship with other gods of that era, there's a strong personification of this God, because it's almost like he's making an arbitrary decision whether or not to create us. He could have not. Yes,
right. The possibility exists of not creating. Right. It is not inevitable that creation is going to happen. Right. It's a decision.
Kind of like not taking for granted anything that.
Very nice. Nicely said, David. Very nicely said. We don't take for granted that the world exists. It is in our tradition, a loving God who creates. Right? Now the question, what moves God to create, right, is one that philosophers have spent, generations trying to answer. Our tradition is not so interested in that. However, Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism spends a long time on this idea. A long time on the movement from God simply existing and that's all that exists and has always existed, if you can say always when there's no time, that moving from that to something else, what is that movement about? In Kabbalah, that's an important moment, right? God fixing to do something. Where does that come from? The movement into doing something is a very interesting Kabbalistic moment.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You said that God is good, love. Now, the other civilizations, I don't think they look at God in such a positive light.
Well, first of all, they don't have one God. They have many deities. So there's a lot going on. So no, for them, creation is not necessarily an act of love. In many cases, the gods create human beings and they get really angry because it's keeping the gods awake. We're keeping the gods awake. And then we need to be crushed. So, it's different in the pagan literature, dealing with creation. And that is one of the differences, I think, for sure. We are not the only ones to have the people created out of clay, right? Or any of that. That's not original. This idea is original. All right. So Bereshit, in some kind of beginningness, God created, this word bara, created, is used only of God in Torah. Only God creates. It's not necessarily yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, creation ex nihilo. It's not necessarily so. It ain't necessarily. But it's implied, right? So, and generally that's the understanding. But bara is used only of God. We can't do baraing. We can do yotzering, right? Forming, shaping. We can't do creating.
Because creating implies that there was nothing before.
Correct. Right. Yesh me'ayin in Hebrew. Something, me'ayin, from nothing. Which is how creation here is understood. Even though we're going to get some interesting suggestions to the contrary.
Even in the Kabbalah, the easy thing coming from a vessel or something?
Even in Kabbalah, it's yesh me'ayin. Everything comes out of nothing. God is the great nothing, capital N. God is ayin. God is nothing. Nothingness. And so out of that emerges everything, including the vessels that shatter. But they don't exist until God moves.
So it seems to me then that some sort of proof in the love, as far as God giving love to human beings, may come in the Abraham-Isaac story.
All of it is an answer to that, God.
Where do you see love here?
We don't. Ruth is choosing to stay with something that I said, which is our tradition views creation as a loving act. That it's a loving God that creates the universe so that we can know God. That's ultimate, and that's an act of love. That's an act of relationship. Which we're going to go there later. Mickey?
In creating, turning on a light on Shabbat, is that like creating light? Is that
No, it's malacha. That's work.
Oh.
It's not creation. No.
Okay, at the expense of sounding stupid, where we are right now is nothing has been created.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Okay, we just know there's a God. We're not assuming that we're going to be created because he could decide not.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so God does the baraing. The word for God here is what? Elohim. So Elohim instead of Yud He Vav He.
Isn't that plural?
So this is a plural singular, like the depths, the waters.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask about the chaotic water.
It is a plural singular, and probably, Reuben, probably left over from when early Israel was polytheistic. So all of the gods that they would have had in their pantheon are combined into the new understanding of there being one force that represents all of them. So it's kind of understandable that it's a plural word in that sense, right? They're all under the umbrella of Elohim. But Elohim, because there's no capitalizing in Hebrew, can mean either our God Elohim or Elohim, other gods, right? So the word is still plural, but when we understand it as referring to the Creator God, our God, it's a plural singular.
It's called pluralia tantum in grammar. 2 words.
How do you say that in English?
Like pluralia tantum.
That's Latin. How do you say that in English?
I think, I don't know.
You don't? Okay. The plural singular. All right. Bereshit bara Elohim. So we're getting the universal God. This is the abstract God. This is the accessible by everybody God, right? Yud He Vav He is the God that Israel tends to be involved with, right? That's how we talk about the God with whom we have a special relationship. Elohim is the universal God concept, yes? Which makes sense because we're talking about creation of the universe, right? It's interesting to me that our story as a people does not start with, and there was a guy named Abraham, right? We firmly locate our stories within the context of all humanity, all of creation.
Ancient Greek tragedies where the chorus would explain to the audience what the environment is before.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And in our case, we understand the one God to have created all peoples, all things, right? That's not necessarily, right, how it has to go.
But it says in the universe.
Wait. Where does it say universe?
I don't know.
It doesn't say universe. Mapitom.
But I want to go back to the beginning when we said that it also created out of nothing.
Don't go there yet. Don't go there yet. You're getting ahead of me. All right, so
Sorry.
in the beginning, Elohim does this business of creating. What does Elohim create? Hashamayim, the heavens, ve'et haaretz, and the earth. Okay, that's pretty clear.
The waters don't get created.
Hang on. Let's look at it. Ve'haaretz, and the earth was tohu vavohu. What does that mean?
It was chaotic.
Chaotic, unformed.
Void.
All of these words mean nothing.
Okay, so they're just...
Because we don't have words for pre-creation. We don't have words for what things were before they were. Right? So we can get near it with things like unformed, void, chaos.
Okay.
But we say chaos in a way because creation is all about making order. So if it's about making order, then what has to come before order? Chaos. But really, none of our words come close to understanding what you're talking about when you're talking about primordial ooze. Right? All right. So it is tohu vavohu. It's in that state.
What line are you?
Line 2.
Page 4.
V'choshech al penei tehom. And choshech, what is choshech? Darkness
On the face.
is on the face of the tehom. All right. So we have choshech. It seems that the choshech that we're dealing with here is not simply an absence of light. This darkness seems to be something in and of itself. It is something, this choshech, right? Because, it's dark. There's no light yet. So, of course it's dark. I mean, they weren't idiots. They knew that. This seems to be suggesting something else. A choshech that is palpable, right? It is often in the ancient world a symbol of evil, of ignorance, of, darkness is somehow demonized almost, right? It still is, exactly right. And that's why the universal symbol for wisdom or enlightenment or God is light, right? So it's just in our nature, I think, We're scared of the
can't
dark.
see.
We're vulnerable in
Yeah,
the
you
dark.
can't see.
So it makes perfect sense that in our human construction of good and bad, light is going to be good, dark is going to be bad. But, and I'm not suggesting that this is saying it's bad. I'm just saying choshech here has, someday, that's another PhD topic I'm going to look at doing, is this choshech. I'm very interested in this choshech. I don't know why, but I'm very fascinated with what this choshech is exactly. Yes?
I've been thinking of childbirth when I heard that first sentence. Because when I was giving birth to my first child, I was alone in a maternity hospital, absolutely alone, giving birth by myself. And it was chaos, and it was darkness, and I didn't know when it was going to stop.
I'm with you, Blanche.
Pardon?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So that was your experience as well, right? So back in the day of ignorance, when women were isolated and right separated in order to deal with this very scary, messy, traumatic, mysterious, magnificent thing called birth. I would love to hear your poem from the standpoint of God giving birth to the world. Because I think that is just a beautiful and profound insight into this text. And I would love to hear God speak, God's experience. Because I think you're right, I think it's here. I definitely think it's here. It's, again, at Exodus, when we talk about birthing a people, through the birth canal of the waters, right, and the blood on the doorposts as they pass through the bloody portal, right, and then through the waters. I mean, you just can't miss the birthing elements there. I think you're 100% right that it's here. 100%. Okay, so we get this choshech that's al panei tehom, that's on the face of tehom. What does your translation say about tehom?
Waters.
Waters? Anybody got something else?
It's not in here, but it's the deep.
The deep.
Great deep.
The great deep.
Well, there was chaos, unformed, and chaotic waters.
Chaotic
Chaotic
waters.
waters face.
Chaotic waters. That's interesting. I like that. All right. So, in the ancient world, there was an understanding that everything was water. If you think about it, water is the element we need for stuff, right? And it is the most kind of, other than air, which we're also going to see, it's amorphous water, right? So chaos kind of includes darkness and the sense of completely surrounding waters that are not the ocean. This, Blanche, is your pregnant God. So we are surrounded by water. Not we, but I mean, creation is, at first, water. Like amniotic fluid. It's dark, and there's water everywhere. You kind of get that sense of, just everywhere. That kind of is what tehom is. That completely surrounding, chaotic, if you will, water. And what we know is that choshech is present. In the ancient world, one of the ancient Near Eastern goddesses involved in creation is a goddess named...
That's the only way to deal with it.
I couldn't figure out it's the board.
No, I don't think it's the board.
Just hand them to me.
Is a goddess named
Just throw them out.
Tiamat.
They can't be saved.
No, they can't when they
And
die.
Tiamat is
Unless you do
a
this.
dragon
So cool body.
kind of form made of ocean water. Often. So she's a serpent, dragon, saltwater, huge, right? Mythic presence. That is the birthing goddess. That is the creatrix, Tiamat. In one of those stories, Tiamat's body, because this is always what happens to goddesses, right? Cut in half by a god. Her top half goes up, her bottom half goes down, and we're going to explain a little bit about that. But that's what are the stabilizing things that separates the waters and allows creation to exist.
What culture are we talking here?
The ancient Near East, Mesopotamia,
Okay.
the neighbor, and the parent culture of early Israel. Right? Early Israel comes out of a region that already has a rich mythic history. Right? That's where this comes from. So, probably what we have in Tehom is a remnant of a story where the goddess is subdued by the male god, Elohim. Here. And so what's left is this watery Tehom. All right. Just a theory.
It's like Venus. Venus in ancient Greek culture comes out of the water, and Botticelli has her coming out of
The seashell.
water as well, yeah.
It's all coming out of the water.
Yeah. So, but it explains a little bit why Tehom might be here. Like when you said it predates, creation, Lisa. This kind of explains it. If you're dealing with remnants of an earlier story that has a Tiamat kind of feature, and now it's subdued by the Elohim God who has sovereignty over everything, it makes sense that it's there. We don't get the story of why it's there. But it can seem like darkness and water precede creation. That they are already somehow there. So it doesn't go into any discussion about it. Torah doesn't care. Let's be clear. Torah doesn't care. I could spend 6 years studying this. Torah does not care. It's just, this is just the story. This is the setting. This is the Greek chorus coming on to tell us the setting before the action starts. All right, so then we have the next. Okay, so Ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. So there is Ruach. What is Ruach? Spirit. What else? Wind.
Breath.
Smoke. Breath. No, breath is nishima, but maybe breath. Maybe breath. Breath in that it is wind. Right? Breath in that it is air that moves. What is the only way you know that there is air? The movement of it. Movement is crucial for creation. Just think about your science. It's fascinating to me that how many thousands of years ago there is a human intuition about how things need to be to start. Right? That's incredible. You have to have water and you have to have movement. So there is the Ruach Elohim, the wind, spirit. I don't know what that means, but okay, right? None of us know what that means. But whatever it is, wind, spirit, something invisible, kind of move. If we're not clear about movement, we get a word for it, merachefet. In another place in Torah, merachefet is the bird, the eagle, hovering over the nest of the young. So a kind of movement and stasis, right? Like so, both, right? A still movement. Think of a hummingbird. Or a helicopter, right?
A rustling.
It's hovering.
A rustling.
A rustling, right? Not exactly directional movement, but movement that suggests presence, right? This motion is necessary and is the trigger of we're going to get God's presence now doing something to this tohu vavohu choshech tehom business, right? This movement is critical.
And when you have hovering or rustling, there's also an implication of potential. In other words, you don't at the instant of the rustling, when you see the leaves moving in not in any particular direction, the potential is, well, they could go that way, they could go that way, or they could just drop back down.
That's exactly right.
You don't know.
This is the potential entering existence. Existence begins with this potentiality. Kabbalah, this is the language of Kabbalah. Potential and actual. That is the language and the world of Kabbalah. We are to bring things from potentiality into actuality. Gashmiut, actuality. That is our whole reason for existing.
Could be called cause and effect.
Cause and effect. God as the prime cause. Right? The effect is the merachefedim.
But isn't it suggesting that's why I think that God is darkness and light both at the same time? Meaning...
No. Because watch what happens next. What happens next?
Oh, well...
What happens next? Vayomer Elohim. So out of this potential, out of this movement into moving, comes Vayomer. And it didn't have to be this way. We take it for granted. It is a radical statement in the ancient Near East. Vayomer. How does creation happen? Through speech. That did not have to be. It could have been God, remember that? Right? Genie? Right? God could have snapped God's primordial fingers. God could have blinked. God could have spit. God could have done any number of things to move from potential into actual. What does God do? God speaks. This is for us as a people, the creative element in the universe, speech, language. Language is creation itself. This universe is made up of speech. Letters. For the rabbis, these letters. That's why they always go back to the Hebrew. Always, to do any midrash, to do any real work. They don't use their language. They go back to this language. Because that is not just a series of letters that makes a word. That is a mystical truth up there. That humanity could spend the rest of created time exploring. Because this is what the world is made up of. These letters. That ordering of those letters means something other than what it means. We'll explore that too.
And you have it all becomes a bit circular, but
Yes.
it makes sense in that what do? People tell stories, which come from words, and
But to say that God creates with speech is
Right.
as a people to say,
Right.
we don't just tell stories.
Right, but we create our own narratives. We create potential. We continue to participate in the act of creation by continuing to speak.
Correct. And not every people sees that as the main. All people tell stories. I'm not saying that, but we are the people of the book, right? Here it is. God speaks creation into existence every moment of every day, say the rabbis. And if God were to stop speaking, the world would cease to exist. Vayomer Elohim. Elohim speaks. What does God speak? Yehi.
Let there be light.
Yehi. What is Yehi?
Imperative.
Imperative of existence. There will exist. That's a new word. That's a new word. There will, what is exist? There's never been exist before this moment. There will exist or light. That is the first real act of creating that we as a people tell. God speaks light into existence. What could that be about? Since there is no...
There is no light.
Sun.
There's no sun.
Also, who's he talking to?
Who's God talking to? So the good news is, we don't have to have an indirect object for this verb,
Because it's intransitive.
because it's just God speaks.
It doesn't have an object.
But there is no object necessarily, but it begs your question, Linda. Usually when one speaks, it's because you are communicating. So usually there's a hearer, there's a listener.
Well,
The light
unless-
is listening, you know?
Unless he
But
just said,
the light doesn't exist until God speaks.
but he says light.
God says Yehi. God says let there exist. Or.
Light wakes up when.
So he doesn't just say or, he says.
No, God says Yehi. Let there exist. Because that's, for me, the big word, not or. The big word is Yehi. There's now going to exist stuff.
Is that an indefinite object then?
What does that mean?
That
does that
we
mean?
take it for granted that God speaks light to somebody?
No, God speaks exist. It's a command. Exist, comma, what's supposed to exist? In Hebrew, that word comes before the object, before the thing that's being existing. Existified. Right? Like, Hebrew works differently than English. We would say light exist. Hebrew works the other way. So when you hear Yehi, you're waiting to hear what is going to Yehi? Or light. There is no sun. What is this light? Now answer, Diane. What is this light? You were right. So what is this light? There's no sun. So it can't mean light like we know it.
Inner light.
Inner light.
Inner light. Knowledge.
The light that is God as we experience it.
Or what opens up when you push some of the darkness aside.
If darkness starts to shift, what is there underneath that or through that? Light?
Life.
For the rabbis, this is primordial light. What does that mean? There's a beautiful translation of Midrash on this that I love, love, love. Because the rabbis see that we are created in God's image, they return the favor and image God in our image. And so if we get up every morning as good Jews, what do you do first thing every morning after you get dressed and everything? What is the first thing you do? Huh? You're going to daven. And when you daven, what do? What's the first thing you do when you start davening? Before tefillin,
You thank, you're appreciative for what we have.
you put on talit. This or is the or of God's talit being opened in the morning. And God robes God's self in God's talit. This is the primordial light from God's talus.
This whole thing is poetry.
It is 100% poetry.
Images that suggest other things.
That are not about linear, scientific explanations. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Because yes, this gets underappreciated as a text, I believe, because we've taken it out of its mythic context and we try to get at proving this or that. Fundamentalists do. We don't need to, thank God. But fundamentalists have to deal with this. And they have to make this work with the Big Bang. Fortunately, it can. But really, we don't need to do that, thank God. We get to go back to the beauty of what this really is about, which is about us considering origin, existence, birthing, creating, just all of it. Like, how can you think linearly about that? I mean, unless you're a modern cosmologist trying to, look at particles, okay, that can be poetry too. But this is not trying to be a linear explanation. And we do it such a disservice when we don't treat it as poetry. So light exists. Vayar, what's the next thing God does? So in this kind of, God is now doing things. God hasn't presumably done anything before. God is baraing, creating, and the first verb involved in creating is vayahiing, right? Speaking things into existence. What is the second verb involved in God creating? Vayar Elohim.
He gave it a name.
Well, before that, Vayar, the first words of verse 4. Vayar, God saw. God speaks, and then God sees. Saw. Vayar is the first word of verse 4. And remember, these verses are imposed on the text. Remember that. There were no verses. Look at a Torah scroll. Ain't no verses. Ain't no punctuation. It is just one glob of text. I mean, they're paragraphs, but there are no verses. This got done late. They're like 1330. And borrowed from the Christian world. Because when the Jews had to fight the Christians about the texts, in those, what are those famous battles called? You know, when they would put the text...
Disputations.
Disputations. When the disputations were happening, you had to have a standard common way of referencing this text. So they imposed the Christian biblical numbering system onto the text because the Christians had this text.
So metaphorically, does the fact that there is no punctuation in the Torah actually suggest that the whole act of creation is A, ongoing, and B, without form in a sense, because there are no end stops, and that it is really what you bring to the act of reading and interpreting Torah.
I think that's a beautiful midrash on our format. I think it's a beautiful midrash.
I mean, but if you pick up a newspaper in Jerusalem, it's not going to have punctuation either.
Well, it will. It won't have vowels. It will have punctuation for sure.
Oh, you mean
it won't be vocalized, but it will have punctuation.
Right. So, if you write Hebrew,
right? There's no vocalization.
There's no vocalization.
Right. No, but we're dealing with not even punctuation.
Oh, okay.
So right, so it's just kind of a run-on. It's just a run-on sentence until you get to the end of a paragraph.
You have paragraphs and books. That's it.
There you go. Exactly.
Also
yes.
Because ancient times, it was so expensive to write for the ink, for the papyrus. Even ancient Latin didn't have lowercase letters. It was all capital letters, one after the other.
Because you need to save space. And this was not even papyrus. Papyrus is easy. That's easy. What was this? This was on?
Skin.
No. Where did these texts originate?
Stone.
Clay, tablets, with a stylus. This is heavy. This is not just troublesome. It's heavy. You have to be very succinct if you're writing on clay. Because you got to schlep it. Right? So a stylus and wet clay, you save as much space as possible. The Torah does not waste words. Diane?
But isn't it true that it was written, the first writing were done on stone, period? That's why the tablet came.
Mesopotamian texts, cuneiform. This was done in cuneiform. I'm not talking about the Stone Age. I'm talking about the Bronze Age. Right? The origins of these texts would have been cuneiform. At the time, that's what they were using in Israel. Papyrus doesn't survive very easily. Right? Stone, we'd move way past that. Way past that.
What I'm saying, the writing started on the stone first.
Yeah, but sure, cave drawings and rudimentary characters start on stone.
But interestingly enough, if you think about it, the tablet, Moses supposedly was written on stone.
So that is a memory way back, right? That's remembering backwards, putting it, right, in the past, at a time when they would have been using cuneiform.
Yeah.
All right. So, oh my gosh, we're not getting very far. Okay, so Vayar Elohim. So God sees. What does God see? The or. And what is the first thing God notices about the or? That what?
Good.
Ki tov. It is good. This is the first divine assessment of existence. It is good. Vayavdel Elohim ben ha'or uvein ha'choshech. And God makes a differentiation, a distinction between light and darkness. And in this case, it gets a proper designation, hey, right? Ha'choshech, the dark. right? The primordial dark. Vayikra Elohim. Now we're going to get God doing what? What's God going to do now?
Give it a name.
Give it a name. Naming is a very powerful act in our tradition. To name something is to identify something about the essence of something else.
It makes it exist. It gives it labels.
It gives it a different kind of
Existence.
And power.
And that is a power. Naming is a power. So pay attention in the rest of Genesis to who names whom. It's very interesting. Who names whom?
God named her.
That is a power. So remind me whenever we get to those texts to talk about who names whom if I don't get there. So God names the light Yom, day, and calls the Choshech Laila, right? What do you call it? Night. Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker, Yom Echad. And there was evening, and there was, meaning for the first time, morning, Yom Echad, one day.
So does this then symbolize the fact that originally it's darkness?
Yes, it doesn't symbolize it. This is it. This is the reality as we understand it. Day begins with Erev. There's Erev, there's Boker. That's a day. That's why all of our holidays begin at night. Yom Echad, day one, begins with Erev. Then Boker. Right? Mm-hmm.
Naming is the actually completion of your poem, when the validating and how we do and how to change our name.
All right, so
And that's why our day started yesterday.
yes, that is why our day started yesterday. Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, right? Always. All right. We talked about there being what? There being
Water.
Tehom. Yes? You'll find I'm a fantastic artist. Okay, so there is Tehom. That's kind of the understanding of what's going on. Until, and this is part of ancient Near Eastern cosmology, until Vayomer Elohim Yihi Rakia Bitoch Hamayim. And God said, let there be a rakia, an expanse in the midst of the mayim, in the midst of the water. Vihi mavdil bein mayim lamayim, that it may separate water from water.
Water from water.
Where is this?
Verse 6.
Oh, this is going on, yeah, okay.
Could you please explain that?
Are you kidding?
I don't think those images just speak to
There you go.
Let there be a rakia that mavdils, that distinguishes, that separates, that differentiates bein mayim lemayim. So in the midst of the mayim is a rakia that's going to separate mayim from mayim. Why does that have to happen? God ya'ases, God makes this rakia and differentiates bein hamayim asher mitachat. So this rakia makes a distinction between the waters that are below tachat and the waters that are above me'al rakia, right? On top, vayehi chen, and it was so. Why does God do this? God calls rakia shamayim. What is shamayim?
Sky.
Okay. Heavens. If you went to Bible school when you were young, you might have called it the firmament. Whatever the heck that is. The firmament. So God calls the Rakia Shamayim, Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker Yom Sheni. There was evening, there was morning, the second day.
I have difficulty picturing this.
What are you saying?
Well,
Reuben?
where's the sky?
Is that not clear?
Where's the sky?
Where's the sky?
Yeah, in this picture. You have water here, you have water there.
You have water above the sky. You have water below the sky. That's all you have right now. You have
I saw
Rakia.
water come out of the sky when it rained.
You have
right?
sky.
Explain that.
So think atmosphere. You have the atmosphere
We got
created.
water up there. We got some water
And
down here.
above the atmosphere is water. And below the atmosphere is water.
We know it's up there, right?
For them, it's like,
They're
duh.
honest.
Like, what else would there be? Duh. All right.
But also because we don't yet have land or earth.
Nachon.
It's hard to picture sky.
Exactly. We don't have our created world yet, so let's go there.
Well, if you're on an ocean cruise.
Right. That's true. Think of being on a boat, and you get more of a sense of this. There's water, there's sky, and above the sky, there's water. Right. Think of that movie Waterworld with Kevin Costner, right? There's just water, sky, and above the sky, water. That's what we have. Until, what? Yikavu hamayim mitachat hashamayim. Let the water below the sky be gathered into one area. That what might happen?
Dry ground could be.
That dry ground can be seen. So all of a sudden, we're getting another layer, which is dry ground.
Maybe he's going to name it.
Right? So now we get something else going on. Okay? And it was so. Vayikra Elohim layabasha eretz. So God called this dry thing eretz, land. Ulemikveh hamayim kara. What? So God calls that land, right? And the other, what does God call the other? Seas. Oceans. Vayar Elohim. What? What does God see about all this business? It was good.
It's good again.
Kitov. It's good. Vayomer Elohim. So God says, let there be deshet, let there be grass on the land, right? According to its seed and its species and all that good stuff. Now there's plant life, right? Where are we?
We're at 12.
Thank you.
Around there.
And I'm not taking time to stop and read because we'll never get anywhere. But Totzei haaretz deshes, so now the earth is going to bring forth vegetation and all kinds of trees and fruit-bearing stuff and trees. And God saw what about that? That it was good. It was very good. And now you have the third day. Yes? Okay. Yom Shlishi. Vayomer Elohim. God speaks again. Yehi. Let there be what? Me'orot barakia. Let there be luminaries in the sky. Ooh, is that a permanent marker? Drivers. Let there be.
It wrote so well.
Luminaries. I know, it wrote too well. Luminaries in the sky. In order to what?
Separate.
To differentiate bein yom uvein laila, between day and between night. And they will be signs, right? For the moadim, for times, but time as in a set amount of time. Seasons is a good interpretation. Uliyamim, and days, bishanim, and years, right? Because how do we tell how long a day is? It's about the lights in the sky. How do we tell how long a year is? By the lights in the sky. We went by a lunar calendar that was always rectified to the solar calendar, always. It was never strictly a lunar calendar, or we would have wound up like Ramadan, having holidays
Well,
move.
and you wouldn't know when the seasons
Exactly right. We had to rectify to the solar calendar so that harvest would be when they're supposed to be. I mean, festivals would have been around harvests. All right. What? Yes.
Is it wrong then to assume that if God is giving creative growth to the place below the sky, the land, that there would be creative existence above the sky, the stratosphere, which might then be other planets or something in the universe?
Well, all we know is that there's Mayim above and Mayim below. The only activity we know of is between the Mayim. The only creative ordering of things is between those chaotic bodies of Mayim. There isn't. Now, could those be split into another Rakia? Why not? The rabbis call God Chei HaOlamim, life of the worlds. Right? Why not? Why not? All we know is this one. All right.
But he does, and the stars get created too in 16.
Yes. All right. What I'd like to do, we get life coming first in vegetation, then in other forms. I want to go, because otherwise we won't get there till 3 years from now, to the creation of human beings in this chapter.
Living creatures.
26.
24, chapter 24, right?
Chapter 24. What? Chapter 1.
We're in chapter 1, verse.
All right. Verse 26. After the beasts, right, and swarming things and creeping things that are what? What does God consider them to be? Tov. Good. My daughter disagrees with some of that, but whatever. Vayomer Elohim. And God says, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu. Let us make Adam, earthling, b'tzalmenu, in our image.
That's so interesting because he says, let us make, not I will make.
So he's with somebody else.
Now what? Right?
Now he's giving us
Now
a lot of
what?
fun.
The royal we.
The royal we.
Yeah.
Okay?
Is that the first
That's
time?
funny.
The first time what?
Abigail, us?
Yes. So, the royal we. That's a safe way to go, isn't it? That's the safest way to go, is the royal we. There's lots of ways to look at it. For a fundamentalist interpretation, no. It is the royal we, or it is God, speaking to the hosts, the angelic hosts, because we are in the image of God and like the angels, right?
Maybe it's we referring to everything that God has created so far.
God forbid, because that would mean what? That all of that helped create.
Right, that the animals and the beasts.
God forbid.
The whole God created universe, which is all God's.
So we have permission to go there. We have permission to go to, we means the universe gives rise to, the created world eventually gives rise to human beings.
Well, all of that is
This is-
necessary to sustain human beings.
And this is why I see no problem harmonizing evolution with this text. Because if you say we means everything that exists before humanity, that is exactly what happened. Isn't it?
We're all made of the same stuff.
The creative energy that we call God moves through everything as it exists and gives rise eventually to a very smart primate.
Up to this point, through 24, when it says God said, let there, these are all imperative. Is the Hebrew always the imperative?
Yes, until here.
Yeah, until here. So, but what's interesting to me about using the imperative is usually, and we talked about this earlier, usually when you're speaking to somebody, when you say, do this, right? I mean, you're not just, imperative to me is directive. Somebody should do this. Somebody who is, but here, all of a sudden they say, let us.
But it's still
And it's not
first
imperative.
person- yeah, it's still first person imperative. It's just a first person plural imperative.
But it's more deliberative.
But then on verse
So
27.
the tense is still it's still imperative.
It's still imperative. And the first one is yehi, like exist. There is no somebody to make something exist, right? God's speaking to the stuff of the universe itself, saying, exist something else. Yes? What?
But then on verse 27, then it's only God created the human being.
Oh, of course. Of course, because
Oh,
it's
then
a
it's
little
not
too
us.
scary the other way if we're going to take it literally. All right, so this is where the fundamentalists have to deal with this text, right? So it's got to be the royal we, or it's God speaking to the angelic hosts as a courtesy, right, before God creates human beings. And there's lots of wonderful midrashim about the angels going, no, don't do it. Don't do it.
Spoiler.
This is a big mistake, God.
Royal we at this time understood, like, we
Yeah.
talk about it now.
And it's interesting. Really, in Hebrew, you don't get a king really speaking na'aseh, unless it's speaking to the people, let us. But really, there isn't so much of a royal we. But
Superimposed on this from later understanding of the royal we.
and I think any biblical criticism deals with the reality that this probably is a remnant of a polytheistic early Israel, just like Tehom is. I personally don't have a problem with that, obviously, but lots of folks do. So the rabbis go to great lengths to try to figure out why this says Naseh, but it does. And so it's let us make Adam, earthling, in our image.
Do the rabbis comment about why they chose this word, which comes from the earth, right? Adama?
Because it is of
Why?
the earth, this thing.
But the human,
Yeah.
so everything is of the earth.
Nachon.
Out of water and
Nothing special about humans?
It's earthling.
Okay.
So, meaning it's not horse. It's not, nothing has terminology used of it other than it's a beast, like the beasts, the swarming things. Now we're getting a thing that's going to be created of the earth, but that is in the likeness of Elohim. That's the differentiation. That's the distinction. Otherwise, we're just another one of the yes, everything derives from earth. However, there's something unique and different about this business. God intentionally makes this earthling in God's own tselem, whatever that means. We don't know what that means.
Okay.
Right? We don't know what that means. All we can know is looking at one another. If we're created in the image of God, we can look at one another, experience one another, and therefore know something of God. What that is up to us, right, to apprehend. That's our job, say the rabbis. That's the point of creating us, is so that we can know that about God. Otherwise, God remains unknown. I just want to finish this because it's very important. 27. Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo. And God created, right? We're using that word created again, right? Because this is now something new. The Adam, the earthling, b'tzalmo, in God's image. B'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, bara oto. Did God create it? Why am I saying it? Because look at the next words. Zachar unekeva bara otam. Male and female, God created them. This is not what you are used to hearing as the creation narrative. Is it? No. This is Genesis 1. This is the first story. We have another story in Genesis 2. We have a whole nother story that starts with this garden and Adam, earthling, and then a bunch of stuff happens from there. You know that story. You don't hear this one. The first story in the book, the first story on the page is this one. Zachar unekeva, male and female. Adam is male and female. For the rabbis, who have to harmonize Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, one of the things that happened is God eventually splits Adam into male and female. Why? Lots of midrashim about it, but mostly I understood this text when I was 9 months pregnant at Rosh Hashanah, celebrating the birthday of the world. I gave birth on Sukkot. So here I was 9 months pregnant at Rosh Hashanah services, right? Talking about the creation of the world. And it's like that question of why? Why move out of unity, cosmic unity, into this business? Why? Because, as I understood, celebrating, writing sermons about the birthday of the world, 9 months pregnant, I loved whatever was inside me already, but in an abstract kind of way, because I couldn't know her. I couldn't know her or really love her until she's born, until she's outside of me, until she's other than me. Because if she's still me, it's a narcissistic, lovely kind of existence and love and enmeshment. That's terrific. Is it really love? Is it really relationship? No. Not until it's apart and somehow separate. This word separated happens over and over in the creation narrative. Separation is what allows for relationship. So if earthling is zachar v'nekeva, male and female, God created them. That's why I said it when it said oto, not him, it. Why separate in Genesis 2? Why have Adam and Chava? Because as long as they're together as one hermaphroditic being, there's no relationship. They're Siamese. Well, no, it's not even that, because they share they share a mind. They share everything. The split for us is not bad. And it's not unequal at all. It is primordial. Because without that, there's no relationship possible. And God creates the universe, and specifically Adam, in order to be in relationship. In order to be known. There's no reason for creation. Right? Just why? Why Rakia? Why all this business? Why? There's no reason other than relationship.
And then when those two parts unite because of love, they come closer.
They create.
They become
partners with the Creator, and they create life. It could not be more obvious that all of that is tov. All of that is good. And when Adam gets created, what does God say about Adam?
Very good.
Very good. Tov me'od. Because it's the first time creation is conscious. It is when God's creation becomes conscious of itself. And that is Tov Me'od. That is very good. That is a Jewish understanding of cosmology. Tov Me'od. It is very good. And the rabbis say, why does Bereshit, why does creation begin with the letter Bet? If the whole universe is created through Torah and created through this language, there has to be a reason. This is not an accident. Why does it start with a Bet? All the letters contended to be the letter that begins the Torah, that begins the blueprint of the universe. How did Bet win?
Aleph is the breath.
Bora. Bora.
Borei, it's the first letter to create.
Aleph is just, first of all, it's not vocalized, it's just the breath.
Aleph is silent. So for the rabbis, Aleph might be over here. Because God is the Aleph of the universe.
And it's the number 2.
It's the number 2. So some rabbis want to say, don't read, God forbid, Bereshit in the beginning. Read instead, there were 2 Reshits, 2 beginnings. Nice word, Pamlet. 2 beginnings. One is what God creates. What do you think the second one is?
Man.
Well, what we do with that. 2 people. Lovely. 2 beginnings. 2 people. This is gorgeous, y'all. My favorite?
It's bracha, maybe.
bracha.
Which-
I mean, yeah, it could be. My favorite is when it can get kind of crazy making with all this what happened, didn't happen, who did it, why, how. The rabbis say, don't ask what's below, do not ask what's above, do not ask what's before, it's none of your business. You creatures, your business is what comes out of Bereshit. That's your concern. Don't worry about before, or up, or down, before creation, above creation, outside of creation, other galaxies. Don't worry about it. The only thing you need to worry about is moving into creation. With your consciousness, with your soul, with your God-given ability to choose bracha or klala, blessing or curse. Good Shabbos.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.